I've got Chris Keathley. I think everybody here knows Chris. If you don't know Chris, you're gonna know Chris. Chris is great. Chris, I don't know that this conference really would be happening without Chris. Stalwart of the community here in Chattanooga. He's the reason that I got into Elixir, and so many folks here in Chattanooga as well. And it brings me great joy to have him offer the final talk of the conference. And I think I had some humorous notes somewhere back here. Somewhere. Yeah, so he's also from Bleacher Report. I mean, why don't you guys save some slots for the rest of us, right? But I didn't write this, but I mean, I still think it's funny. And he may be the only developer here with more opinions than Dave Thomas. So, with that, Chris Keathley, warm round of applause.
So, my friend, I love you, but you're wrong. I need to set the record straight real quick. I want to be very clear, and I think we all need to be very clear, that this conference would not happen without two very important people. And I think we all need to give them a huge thanks for their intentionality, for their earnestness, their hospitality, and that's Bruce and Maggie Tate. So Bruce called me. I was out one night with my friend Neil, who's probably left by this point, and he called me up and he said, I want you to speak at Gig City, and I want you to close the conference. And I was like, oh, that's an amazing honor. Thank you so much. And Maggie was on the phone. She said, do you have a title for your talk? I need the title, because I got to put it on the schedule. And I said, well, I have a title. I'm workshopping it still, and it's How I Failed to Live My Childhood Dreams. And she just big pause, and then she goes, we're just going to leave it untitled for now. But now I'm on stage, and I'm going to tell you about how I failed to live my childhood dream. So I grew up down here in South Florida. Close to Palm Beach, which is in the news recently for a bunch of reasons, most notably alligators. That's mostly what we're well known for. We also have this phenomena called Florida Man, you may have heard of. This is a real thing. 100%. Yes, exactly. Yeah, right? Totally a real thing, right? In a case... Well, this is the only one that I felt appropriate to put on here. There's so much worse. And occasionally you get the twofer, you get a Florida man with an alligator, which is really awesome, which I love. And so this is what growing up in Florida was like, really. Except even, if you can believe it, it was more harrowing than this. So, but the other really cool thing is that I was located very close to this place. And that right there, so yeah, all right, spoilers. That is Cape Canaveral, home to the Kennedy Space Center. I love that we're talking about NASA so much. This conference is great. That right there is the vehicle assembly building. I got to go in there once. It was awesome. I'm not supposed to say that. This isn't recorded, right? All right, anyway, also known as the VAB or VAB, and it's amazing. And from my house, we could actually go outside, and we could actually watch shuttle launches when I was a kid. We could see them going off in the distance, even from that far away. This is Jupiter, where I actually grew up. This is Jupiter Lighthouse. And in the distance there, that big, long trail is Atlantis, the very last flight that Atlantis ever went on. And that's a photo. You can see me in the background of it, but that's a photo I actually have hanging in my house. And I was bottle fed on this stuff. I mean, my dad, I was incredibly privileged to grow up with two amazing parents who kind of cultivated this hobby, this interest of mine. This is my dad's office now. Like, it's just filled with models of rockets he's built and photos and memorabilia and probably some Dean Koontz novels because he's a 60-year-old white dude. As you do. We would go on trips all the time. This is me as a kid sitting inside of a Gemini capsule or a replica. I'm not sure. I don't remember on this one. I was already telling my dad what to do, even at the ripe age of 6. So I was off to a good start. And this is how I grew up. I mean, I just loved this stuff. I just internalized it. And I was even fortunate enough to get to go to actual launches. I still have this. I don't know why, but I mean, other than it's awesome. This is the card we had to put in our car when we went to watch STS-86. This is Atlantis. This mission flew up to Mir, and it brought supplies, and it traded out some astronauts when it flew to Mir. We actually got to go watch this. And when you go watch it, you sit on this bank, and you're separated from the launch pad by this big, this kind of like river. And you can kind of see, it's hard to tell, it's very far off in the distance, but right in the center there is the launch site, and then way off to the right is the VAB that we talked about earlier. And they would roll the shuttle out from there and take it to the launch site and watch it. And I got to see this thing go into space. Like, as a 7-year-old kid, there's literally nothing more formative and inspiring than watching a handful of humans go to space. Like, that's amazing. Like, I can't begin to explain what that did in my life and how that influenced me. And literally at this launch, I was like, I want to work for NASA. Like, I want to do this. Who gets to do this? And I think somebody there was like, I think like chemical engineers or something. And then I promptly forgot about that and didn't do that. And it's funny because I didn't want to be an astronaut. Like, I didn't actually want to go to space, but I did want to send other people to space. So I'm not sure what that says about my personality. I can think of a lot of people I just send into space now, am I right? Yeah. And that's kind of where it went. I really wanted to do this. I promptly, as I became a teenager, forgot about it, got obsessed with other things. But 15 years later, I actually kind of got my shot. So I was going into my senior year of college, and I was very privileged to get to go to college, was able to get a scholarship and go kind of at the last minute, and that worked out for me. But here's the thing. I was terrible at college, like really bad. And I'm about to be very vulnerable with all of you. I'm going to actually show you my transcript going into senior year. And some of y'all might be like, this isn't that bad. What are you complaining about? But it was really bad for me at the time, so I hope you can sympathize with me. This was my GPA going into senior year. It was a 2.7. Somebody said, wah. I get it. I mean, this isn't the worst thing in the world. Like, other people have had worse GPAs, other people have had worse lives. And I totally acknowledge that. But this was hard for me. I mean, it was hard to watch a lot of my friends who were also in school with me succeed at these things and go on to get jobs. And I had struggled for a long time to get an internship or a job or to get anybody to hire me. I later found out, this is a pro tip, if you just take your GPA off your resume, no one will ask you about it. So just don't put it on there. But I hadn't learned that trick yet. And so I worked in the one place I could get a job which was a factory. And that's how I kind of worked my way through school for a long time. But I had one sort of big break. And in my junior year, I had built this thing called, which was a multi-touch table thing. And so we'd actually built this. And that's Flash. That's how we used to make the internet for you young people. And I taught myself this. I had no background in this. I just learned how to program, and I did it. And that's probably why I got a D in electromagnetics. Also, like magnets, how do those things even work? I took a class in it, and I still can't tell you. So, yeah. So So I worked on this thing, and it proved, even though I had been turned down from a lot of other research projects and stuff like that, it sort of proved that I was able to still build things and still do stuff. And it was a cool table, it was a cool project. We built this thing, it was just this big box, and inside of it was a projector and a camera. You can see we were very high tape. It is scotch taped to a board. And then we flooded the thing with IR light, and so whenever you pressed your fingers on it, we could like hack together some super simple Python like OpenCV stuff, and it would track the finger movements, and that's how we managed to get that to work, which was very cool for the time. The iPhone had not come out yet, so we weren't obsolete yet. But finally, we were going into senior year, and a project came in. NASA was going to do an undergraduate design challenge called the Lunabotics Mining Competition, which is Lunabotics is like the dumbest name ever, but it is super funny. So they was going to do this mining competition. It was open to all these different schools, and if you got into the competition, you got a little bit of dough to be able to make a robot for NASA. And it was like the entire plan of my life had unfolded before me. I saw this opportunity, I was like, this is it. This is how I solve all of my problems. Because I will get this job. Oh, and I should be very clear. The winner got an internship. And so I was like, this is it. I will get to live my childhood dream. I'm going to work at NASA. I believe they would get funding at the time. It was a different time. We were so hopeful. And I really believed that this was going to be it. So we submitted a proposal, and of course, because it was my destiny, we got in. And we were actually able to build this robot and compete in this challenge. So what was it? What did we actually have to do? Well, these diagrams are going to be more detailed than what we were actually told before going there. That's a different story. The basic idea is you'd be in a box. You have to put your robot inside of a box. And it's a very large box. And it's filled with a lunar dirt called regolith simulant, which they pull out of New Mexico somewhere. And you put the robot inside of here, and then the goal was to be able to drive your robot across to the excavation area. It needed to dig dirt, put it in a box, turn around, come all the way back to the starting area, and put it into some sort of deposit. And we could control it. We were allowed to control it from another room. We had to be in a separate area across the competition area. And we could control it over like a local area network. And at the end of all this, the goal was to go to Florida, put this thing in a box, and actually run it and see how it did. So this was our team. There was 4 of us, and our professor, who was kind of like mentoring us. And these smiles only lasted about 3 days before our 20-something-year-old very boy idiot brains that had not been done forming, trying to start putting together a design document for this thing. And this was literally the most dysfunctional team I've ever worked on. This was the epitome of like strong opinions held strongly. Like we never gave stuff out, and we argued about the most inane, stupid crap. Okay, this is the dumbest one. So there was the grand debate, the debate to end all debates. Are we going to use wheels or are we going to use tracks? This is so stupid. Vim and Emacs don't have anything on this. At least that has a right answer, which is Vim. So this is easily the stupidest debate I've ever been a part of. And 3 of us were like, let's just use wheels. Those are easy to build. And one dude, let's call him Thomas, because that was his name, and was adamant, we've got to use tracks. There's no other way. Because there's definitely no sort of prior art of any of NASA ever using wheels on the moon or anything. And they definitely don't build robots that they send to the moon with wheels, and we couldn't have looked at these pictures. And that was kind of the thing, though, is we never actually looked at the pictures. We just argued. And it's so stupid. And if you want to know how many tests, how many things we actually tried, how much research we actually did, literally any sort of finite element analysis we might have tried, any sort of math, Literally anything, 0. It was just opinion. It's like we gained our opinion, and then that was what we fought for. We just never gave it up. And that created this entire culture in our team of just not communicating. We just started divvying up work so we wouldn't have to talk to each other anymore. So from my perspective, I was mostly in charge of this stuff because I was the only one who at all enjoyed programming. I later discovered that I really enjoyed programming more than I enjoyed engineering, and that's why I'm standing in front of you today. But my job was to build the networking and control systems. That's a fancy way of saying like I needed to send packets over a network, and I needed to create the boards and the software on the boards and all of our embedded systems to drive this robot. These were all things I did not know how to do, that I had not been trained in. I did not take a class in networking. I took a class in electromagnets. That did not prepare me for this. I did learn how to do triple integrals, but that was about it. And so that was what I was tasked to do. The problem was that everybody else had things to do as well, except they valued school a whole lot more than I did. And so this was sort of their blow-off class. And so they were focused on other stuff. So when it came time to do power management, I was like, well, I can't build this thing without power management, so I guess I'll just do that. I'll put that on my stack too. And then it turned out we actually had to build a thing. I happen to know how to weld and to machine things because I come from a long line of people who worked for a living. So when it came time to do fabrication of stuff, like I went down to the machine shop and started fabricating it. And when all that needed to be put together, well, like they had stuff to do and it needed to get done. So like I just did that too. And I just put that on my stack as well. And I just was like, I'll just build the whole thing. It's be fine. I'll do it. I'll manage it. Because otherwise it wasn't going to get done, right? So this is what I looked like for most of my senior year of college. Long-haired, and yes, you are correct, my ears were pierced. And I hunched in the engineering building over my little robot for a very, very long time. I blew off everything. I just stopped going to classes because it was like, doesn't matter, because I'm going to get this job at the end of this, and that's all I want. I just want this. This is somehow going to sort of save me from all these problems. I couldn't get a job before, but now like I can, it's like a cheat code. Like I'll just win and then I'll get a job. So I blew off everything. I didn't have much of a social life to begin with, and I kept blowing that little social life that I had off as well. This is my favorite picture from that era because this is not a real smile. That is, I showed up in order to get this giant cup of coffee down here from my then girlfriend and was like, I gotta go. I'm gonna turn around. And she was like, take a picture with me. I was like, and then I left. So that was the only picture we have of there. She put up with me so much that I then later asked her to marry me, and she's back there. Supporting me and my idiot man-childness from day one. But slowly it started coming together over the course of a year and trying to like manage to still maybe get grades and graduate from college. I was able to tick some of these things off the list. So we started popping the stack, right? Finally got all these fabrication stuff done, took that off the stack. Finally got some assembly stuff done, took that off the stack. And finally got to power management, and at the time, one of the other people on the project said, I haven't done anything on this and I need an A because I have a 4.0. And I was like, you can go to hell. But I'm a nice guy. So I was like, okay, I need you to build a voltage regulator. It's going to be the voltage regulator for our motors. And all it needs to do is drop the 12-volt battery down to 9 volts. That's all I want you to do. He said, okay. So we took that job, he did a voltage regulator, sent that off to him. I built the rest of it. And then I proceeded to do my actual job. So this is, unfortunately, I know this is super blurry, I'm sorry. This is the only photo I have of the control board. You can't see anything. But we had this control board, we bought it off the shelf, we spent entirely too much money on it. The Arduino was very new, and my professor said, that's just a toy, it'll never catch on. It's like the guy who sold Apple stock right before, whatever. So I started trying to put this thing together, and I realized that this thing is super buggy. So guess how I learned about SVN? I pulled down the source code and I was like, this is C. How hard could that be? And I knew a little bit of C. I taught myself more C to be able to do this. I had to learn about AVR toolchains. I had to learn about programmers. I had to learn about all these different things that had to happen. It took a very long time, but finally we patched the firmware. I was able to write real code for this thing and get it to work. And so this part of it was done. And I also needed to build some sort of interface for this thing. And I was like, well, I'm a 20-year-old dude, so I guess I'll use an Xbox controller. That's readily at hand. And I used XNA. Does anybody remember XNA? The game framework? Yes, that thing was awesome. Then they killed it. But this is the original. I printed this out because I was required to put source code into my design notebook for whatever that's worth. So I actually still have record of this. This is the only remaining code I have from this project. But this is some of the code we had to reuse to actually be able to send UDP messages over the network to the thing and actually tell it what to do. And I worked on this right up until I think 3 days before we had to go to Florida. And then we did our final test. And by final, I mean first. So, and I'm just going to show you the video of how that test went, and I'm going to let it speak for itself because it was really bad. I mean, it's not even putting dirt in the box. It's throwing it on the ground. This is the biggest waste of time and money. But it's got the wheels. That's the takeaway. So we did this, and it was at this point that I started to think, I don't know that we're going to win. I started to get very dismayed. But it was like, what are you going to do? We're leaving Florida in 2 days. So went back inside. And I wanted to run one final diagnostic thing. We'd unplugged everything, and then I was like, actually, I want to check one thing with some source code stuff. So go, hey, dude, can you plug that in? And he was like, yeah, sure. So I turned around and I started doing stuff with my computer, and all of a sudden I hear, psst, oops. And I turned around and I was like, there should not be smoke coming out of my microcontrollers. And it turned out he had plugged the batteries for the motor directly into it, and then it doesn't matter. A lot of current, just a lot of current went through that thing, and it killed it. Dead. This kills the microcontroller. And I just stood there, and I was like, first of all, you can just literally walk away from me, because I'm very upset right now. And what are you going to do, right? So I did the only thing I could do. I packed up all my programmers. I made sure I had copies of all the source code for the firmware, and I overnighted one to where we were going to be in Florida, because there was no way we could get one to where we were. And we packed this thing up in broken state, and we drove it a very uncomfortable 18 hours to Florida. Just the most uncomfortable. There was not a lot of talking. It was bad. So we left. We turned around and we left. And we just drove. We finally got there. This is in the Kennedy Space Center building. This is where kids get to go to do space camp. And I pulled the thing apart, and I spent the next 8 hours of my life in this position, programming the thing, getting it reinstalled, making sure all of it worked, reprogramming it, flashing firmware. I know you nerves people have it really well. On these devices, it takes a while. So it was a whole day. And we finally got it all put back together, got it working, stripped a bunch of wires, and finally, it's not moving. Why is it not moving? Well, it's not moving, turned out, because when NASA said they were going to use some sort of local area network thing, they hadn't really told us why, what that meant. And they had definitely not told us it was going to have some sort of military-grade hardening on it that we were not aware of, but it did. And so we couldn't connect. We just couldn't send it messages. So about 3 in the morning, as insomnia, I'm smiling, and I do not remember smiling this entire trip, so clearly some sort of madness had set in at that point. We just troubleshoot all day. We worked all day. And then this guy, I don't know his name, and this is the only picture I have of him. But this man is a saint. Him and his buddy, his little intern down there, he literally worked with me for probably 7 hours and just stood there and was like, we're going to make it work. We'll figure it out. And I was like, you're awesome. I want to be like you. And we worked all night. It was about 3 in the morning. We finally got it to connect over the network. And we sent it packets, and it moved. It moved forward and backwards. And we were ready to go. So we pushed it back over to our area. We put the batteries on the charger. We walked away, went to bed, and tried to get a night's sleep. So came back the next day, turned it all back on. This is going to be awesome. I'm feeling good. We missed our practice day 1 because it took so long to get it working, but that's okay. We're going to compete today. No big deal. It's going to be great. And it wasn't moving again. And I was like, what in the world? How can it not be moving again? So you do what you do. You get back down there and you rip all the wires back out and you start taking the whole thing apart again. You're like, is it the network? Let's troubleshoot the network again. Nope, networks looks good. What is going on? And I was like, dude, hand me my multimeter. And he hands it to me. Or I was like, hey, check the voltage coming out of the battery. And he had it in current mode. And he killed my multimeter as he hooked it up to the battery to figure out what the charge was on it. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. So then I went to Virginia Tech, and I was like, can I steal one of your multimeters for a bit? They were very generous and said, go to hell. And then, not to throw them under the bus. So I went to Georgia Tech, and they were super nice. And they handed me a multimeter, and I was able to figure out what's going on. And I finally figured out, remember that voltage regulator? It didn't work, like at all. And it never did anything. And in fact, when I cracked open the box, which was black, there wasn't anything inside of it. And batteries have this thing. So see, we hadn't charged the batteries in a while. And batteries do this thing where as they run for a while, they lower their voltage. And it just so happened to be that we were running at a lower voltage, and that's why it worked. But fully charged, our speed controller for the motors was correctly saying, this voltage is way too high, I'm shutting off so you don't kill me. I learned a very valuable lesson that day about verification that I've not forgotten to this day. Trust but verify, my wife likes to say. So what do? Well, I don't have time to, or parts or anything. There's no Radio Shack to run to. It had just gone out of business. And they didn't have components there anyway. What am I going to do? So I did what I was like, well, if it works, if the battery's dead, let's run the battery. So I literally pushed the thing onto its side. I took the battery and hooked it directly to the motor and just ran the motor, which was obnoxious, for like 3 hours. That's an exaggeration. A long time, up until we had to go to the end of the box. But meanwhile, all is not lost. There is still hope. Because as bad as we suck, everyone else sucks too. So this is a school, we'll just call them Virginia Tech. So this is, okay, cool. We'll call it Virginia Tech. I don't know if you can see in the background, they're the one with the big spiral auger thing, because that's efficient to send to the moon. I don't know if you can tell what's happening up there, so I'll enlarge it for you, CSI style. That's a fire. Karma is rough.
Are you smiling? On the inside.
I would never, I plead the fifth. There was also people like this. These people were very nice. They had a whole thing. Oh, there's music, cool. They had a whole thing. Then it fell apart. And then it looked like this afterwards. Which, I mean, that was pretty catastrophic. So I was like, that's awesome. Like, at least if you're going to go out, that's a good way to go out. And this kept happening. I could not find a video of it, but I swear to God, one of them tore itself apart as it was trying to dig through this dirt and just threw metal everywhere. It was like battle bots. Like, it was amazing. So I'm sitting there watching this. The battery, meanwhile, at my feet, like this giant piece of trash is like just spinning this motor, and I'm like, we still got this, guys. So it's finally our turn. We go to literally the Mission Control Center. This is where Space kids do mission control, but it was very poetic. So we go in there. You can see inside this like little blue room. You can see a video feed coming in. You have a place to put your laptop. You can set up, and I was like, we got this. This is my moment. Through all adversity, nothing can stop me. I have come through hell and back, and I will not this will happen. And they said, okay, it's time, go. And I pressed forward on the Xbox 360 controller, and it moved 4 inches, and then it stopped. And it stood there. And it did not move again. And I promise you, I put my head on that desk and I sobbed. I cried an uncomfortable amount of time, like a really long time. Like to the point where the NASA person in the room was like, okay, dude, you gotta go. Like, the next team's coming. You gotta get out of here. And I got up and I walked away and I went and I just walked. And I just really considered what I was gonna do with the rest of my life. Because my plan had failed. Like I hung everything on this. This was it. I'd blown off school. I was about to take a 5th year because I had blown off so much school to do this. And in fact, I had to do a 5th year in order to finish college after this. Not a wise decision in hindsight. And I went for a walk. I went for a long walk around the Kennedy Space Center. I just looked at the different artifacts they have there, the different stuff they have. And I just thought about it and just contemplated like where I was. And I stumbled upon this group, this random like unaffiliated group. And this NASA executive was like, Atlantis is coming in for a landing, and it's the last time it's ever gonna land. It's the last shuttle mission that's ever flown off, and it's coming down. If we go to the roof right now, we can all see it. I said, well, that sounds like a hell of a lot better than what I'm doing right now. So I went up to the roof, and I watched Atlantis land. The same spaceship that had caused me to want to do this in the first place. The same thing that had inspired me to be an engineer. And I'd like to tell you that I thought about all that at the time. I was kind of too mad to think about all that at the time. But there was a certain poetry to it. And I thought a lot about what that means, about what the shuttle mission had meant and what this project had meant to me. And while I was up there, I got this challenge coin. I don't know if you're familiar with challenge coins. I actually have it. I actually keep this on my desk to this day. And I don't know if you can see what's on here. You're welcome to come up and see it afterwards. But that's Atlantis, and it's flying into the sunset. And it's a way of saying goodbye to the shuttle program, a program that had long outlived its life, that was old and needed to be retired. But it's also flying in the sunset, which means there's a new day coming. There's something new and interesting around the corner. And there's a hope of a promise and like something else going on. And it took me years to really peel apart how I felt about all this. And really think through what this impact that it had on me. Because it had been the death of sort of my dream as a kid. But I went back to go to school. I decided, yeah, I'm going to finish this college thing because at this point it's like sunk cost. What else am I going to do? And they ran the challenge again the next year. And I got to be a very subtle mentor to the team that went because my school got accepted to go back again. And the very next year, they won by unanimous decision for their design and their project. And that was just about like getting to live my childhood dream. And since then, they've gone a bunch of times. They've gone a whole bunch. My school's literally been involved every year since then. And these are all the pictures that I have. There's a bunch more. And yeah, I don't know. I think about that a lot and about what that means and like what you learn from failure. Because the thing is, and as we talked about this earlier, failure is literally always an option. In fact, I think I'm going to revise this and say failure is the option. You're really on the razor's edge, right? And most of what you're doing is trying to mitigate failure. And the key here is to fail in ways where you can sort of contain the fallout. And that applies to systems, to projects, to things that you're working on. It also kind of applies to things that you try to do in life, right? like community projects or things that you're passionate about, your family, your friends. Things aren't always going to go the way you want them to. And we have to be mindful of that. We have to be cautious of that. And we have to accept the fact that when we fail, it's an opportunity to learn and for new people to go on and do new and interesting things after us. I also learned something incredibly important, which is that teams are what make a project successful. I think I used to have this opinion, and I think it's wrong, that the best software projects in the world were made by like one person. I used to have that opinion. I think that's just fundamentally wrong at this point. Because even though you might have things like Clojure and Git and Elixir even, who have these sort of figureheads, these people that you can point to, those people are not working in a vacuum. They're working with the support of their peers, with other people contributing. And I don't think you can do this alone. And I think that's true over a really long time. Like your team doesn't have to be the people you're working with directly. The team can be the people that came before you, who might have failed and learned, and you can learn from them and engage with them and what they've learned in their life. The other incredibly important thing is that teams never fail because of one person. I think I spent a long time looking back on this project and feeling slighted. Like I'd been robbed of my chosen destiny. And that's just not how it works. Teams win as a team and they lose as a team, and they fail and they succeed as a team. And it took me years to understand as well that I was as much a part of that problem as anyone else. Because by trying to shoulder the burden of what I perceived to be everyone else's problems that I was just going to go do, I created a toxic environment. I created an unhealthy environment where we didn't have any trust. We didn't count on each other. We didn't value the opinions of each other. And it took me a really long time to realize that. Successful teams are always going to be built on trust and understanding, aligned around a common goal, fighting not for their own ideals, but for the success of the project. And if you can align around that, and you can trust each other, and have candid conversations with each other, you're already better off. And finally, the last thought I want to leave you with is that it's up to us to build the community we want to see. And I think this is true in our careers. I think it's true in our own lives. And I think it's true for those of us in this room who are part of the larger Elixir community. We get to choose at this point what we want this community to look like, what the values that we're going to hold dear are. And that doesn't mean that we're always going to agree with each other, but we need to trust each other's intentions. We're all working for the same goal, to build this community, to be in this room. We're all weird, y'all. We're all in this room together because we're weird. We have to trust each other. And we desperately need to open ourselves to new ideas and new ways of doing things. And frankly, it's about damn time that we start showcasing people with different ideas from different backgrounds, from people who don't look like us, who don't think like us, or maybe come from a different walk of life. We need to respect each other, and I think if we do that, we're going to build a community that's going to stand the test of time, and we're going to do something really cool, and we're going to build awesome stuff, and we're going to maybe, just like Dave said, change the world. Thanks.